So I've turned the lights back on, the three lights that we made, and I've gotten rid of the use default material, and instead I'm using the shaders we made. So in the perspective view, you can see how we've distorted, or how I've distorted the vessels there. We can go to the front view maybe to make sure we get. Let's turn off the show lights here. I'll say show none. Show polygons. I'm going to say show deformers as well because we're going to use that. Alright, so this is my target. That's what I want the vessel to get to. And this is my base. This is what the vessel started. So I select the target first in the object mode, and then I hold the shift key and select the base, go under deform, blend shape, and it's going to give me the option of naming that right there in that little box. Just to make sure you saw what I did here. So deform, blend shape. And then see, anytime you see a little box in this list, that means there's options available. I click that box. I'm going to call this aneurysm. Okay, and I'm going to say create. Now it doesn't look like anything's happened, but if I go up to Windows again and I look under animation editors and I go to where it says shape editor, I now get this aneurysm that was the name we gave. And if I move this slider, you can see now that I can change the base to turn into the target. So the base is selected here. I'm going to make sure it's at a smooth, both of these are at smooth, say, preview mode. And that way the base will look a little more natural as it distorts. Okay, so that's great. We can do that, but then how do we use that? So down here I have a timeline. It's set to from 1 to 120. If you're not seeing that timeline, under animation editors, you want to go down there and under Windows, and you want to say look for the timeline there. Okay. Whoops, I'm sorry, that's the wrong thing. I'm sorry, yeah, so I hit it here. Under Windows, it's under UI, user interface, and see where it says time slider. That will show the time slider. So if you don't see the time slider, go ahead and make sure you select this option. Alright, so the time slider's open here, and you notice there's a little gray box here. That's the playhead. The playhead's at frame 1. And where it says P cylinder 2, that's the target. Okay, the duplicate. So what I'm going to do is, right now, the target is at 0, meaning the base is not trying to look like the target at all. And right next to the following, or the far right column, it says key. I'm going to click that button. Now it doesn't look like anything came out here, but if I click on my base and I click on inputs here, see where it says aneurysm? Notice now when I make that active, it shows that little thin red line. That means a keyframe has been set at frame 1. So now I'm going to go down to frame 120. I'm going to change the value here to 1, meaning make the base look exactly like the target, or 100% like the target. And again, I'm going to key it. Okay, let's take the grid off. And again, if I select my base and I go to inputs, shows up. So I've got a red line here at 120, meaning there's another keyframe here. So we're working at 30 frames per second. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look way over here to the right, there's a little icon of a red person with a little gear above it. That's the settings here for this time slider. And generally what you want to do is set the playback speed to be play every frame, and we want to do 24 frames, and we know we want to go 1 to 20. Okay. We want to do, I'm sorry, we want to do 24 frames for 1 second. Other, which would be, just let me do 24 for 1 second. That's what we'll do with 24 frames per second. So 120 is 5 seconds. All right, so if I go back to rewind and play it over the course of 5 seconds, that base changes or morphs. Now, there's a couple ways we can record that. We can record it by rendering it, which will take a little more time and memory. We set up our window before, so let's make this thing. I want to crop it so you don't see the ends. Just because it's kind of compositionally boring. Let's move it a little bit out of the center position. And again, just play it to make sure we have it. So I've got the lights on, I've got the grid turned off, so we don't have that in the way under show. I took the grid out so that it wouldn't be in the background. And we can take out the what's called the render area, to determine that. And that should still give me pretty good insight there. Okay. So what I want to do is look under Windows, and I'm going to go to something called Play Blast. And this is a way you can get a pretty good approximation of what your animation is going to look like without going through the rendering process, which will be a little more time consuming. So we want to use this H.264 encoding. The AV foundation is fine. Display size from the render settings. Okay, that's what we did earlier. Remember when we made that like 960 by 540 high by 960. I'm sorry, 540 wide by 960 high. We're going to save as a file, and the movie file. Let's see where we're going to save it. So because we made that project earlier, it's going to save in this movies directory, and we can name it. Now if I click Play Blast, you'll see this little thing happen, and then it will come up. So this is what it made as the file. Now it didn't crop it the way I thought, but at least we got a pretty good approximation of what we have here. So that's a way of kind of getting a cheap, I see I didn't, when I took it off here. No, that's what, well, yeah, I'm not 100% sure why it didn't clip it like that. Oh, I see, I had the wrong thing selected. That's Here we go. That's the size. So let's do that real quick. Let's just zoom in on this and do another play blast. There we go. So now that movie is an MOV on the Mac. On a Windows machine, it will be AVI. And then you can bring that up into YouTube if you wanted to. And then put it on a web page or just show it on your YouTube channel. The other thing, if we wanted to render this, we would go back into that render setting. In other words, if we wanted a more high-end quality version, we'd go back to the render settings and tell it that we wanted go to the top of the list, tell that we want a name, image format. What I would recommend if you're going to render it, and if you're going to render it, you're going to have to take this into another piece of software, like Adobe Media Player. So I would render it as a TIFF file with no compression. Okay. Now right here it says frame animation. So it says name extension single frame. Well, we want to instead say name number extension. So what that will do is you look up here, it will say, okay, the file's name aneurysm 0001 TIFF, and then the end is aneurysm 0010 TIFF, so 1 to 10. Well, we're going to change that. We're going to say render from 1 to 120. And we would say the padding is the number of units, digits you have, right? So if you've got, like we have 120, 3 digits, we would want to go from 001 to 120. That's really important that you get this padding right, because it won't understand something like Media Encoder or After Effects won't understand if you try to import 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has to start with 001, 002 and work its way all the way up. We did the size, so we'll leave the size alone. Resolution, if you're going to put it on the internet, you might as well just keep it at 72. Alpha channel, you want to keep that on. And then we would render it. You would so the render settings are set. Then we would go under this render submenu and go to batch render, and it would then begin rendering it. Okay. The issue with that is if we render, let's say we just render it right now. We're just going to render this one frame, static frame. Okay, and I think if we pull this open a little more, we can see, yeah, it's telling me at the bottom here. Come up a little bit. So it took about, I think it says, I can't quite read it to be honest with you, I think it says 7 seconds. So what you can do is then imagine if I have 120 frames and each frame takes 7 seconds, how long will it take? That's why the preferred way to first evaluate whether you got the animation to do what you want is to use that play blast. Because when you actually get into some rendering like we do at school, you're looking at 18, 20 hours by the time you get 24 frames per second. You're making a 5-minute movie. Okay, that's enough of that.